Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, I'm going to go live from my personal page today. Um, Apparently, Facebook changed their kind of policy about where you can go live from. So, they had it in events and groups. Um, Let me actually see if I can share it in my group. Cool, perfect. All right, cool. Tim, what is going on? I'm going to do a live from my personal page today. Facebook changed their kind of like algorithm or whatever, so you can't do lives from your group page anymore. So I'll do it here. And let me see here. Cool. Okay. I'll do it here and then post it to our group afterwards or something of that sort. I'll figure it out. So, okay. Tim, let me know what's going on with you. We haven't kind of spoken in a little while. Hope everything's well. And okay, so you guys, for the live today, we'll be covering kind of how to use your finances and money to better facilitate your health goals and stuff of that sort. So I'm just going to go down the list. I have a list right here in front of me, and then we'll just go down one at a time. So I'm just going to go like do a hypothetical situation, just like I say in every single live. Remember, everyone's situation is different, and it's always really tough and challenging to give health advice, kind of doing lives or putting out information online without actually meeting the individual you're giving the advice to. Because everyone's goals are different at the end of the day, and there are no absolutes. Everyone's situation is a little bit different, and those little differences actually make a big difference in terms of how successful the outcome of the journey is. And there are no like there there could be some fundamentally general principles, that everyone can follow, but outside of that, it's fairly it's fairly variable in terms of what's going to work for one person and what's going to work for another. And especially if you get into the details of what caused health issue ABC. So, for example, if you have, two people, both males, both white, both 40 years old, and both 20 pounds overweight, the reason why one person is 20 pounds overweight could be vastly different than the reason why another person is 20 pounds overweight. And that's why it's important to always meet the problem at the level of the problem. Because if you don't do that, the problem is going to persist, especially if you get into symptom management healthcare strategies. Sure, they're easy to understand and they do provide, hints of success or maybe like a small relapse of the issue and stuff of that sort. But the issues keep coming back, and then unfortunately, just the person kind of remains sick their whole entire life. Osmar, good to see you. Tim, welcome to the live. I see a couple of other people jumped in. So, guys, we'll be talking about how to use finances and the money you kind of work hard towards to help facilitate your mental and physical health goals, also your aesthetic goals. Goals are going to vary, but basically, what I mentioned is Donald, good to see you. But basically, what I mentioned in short, that it's kind of tough to give advice just to random people I never know. So I'm just going to phrase it in terms of a hypothetical situation here and what I would do in that situation. So let's just presume I'm a 40-year-old male that's 30 pounds overweight or 40 pounds overweight or more. And I don't want to be overweight anymore. And I'm kind of looking at how I could use my finances to better facilitate me losing the weight and stuff of that sort. So the first step before I even start giving out any of these tips and advice and how I would use the money, et cetera, et cetera. First step is like just the individual has to come to the concrete and honest resolution that like being overweight, having various health challenges, not having, the aesthetics you'd like with your physique or skin quality. A lot of people have skin issues and stuff of that sort, and just not accepting that anymore as acceptable for you. That's going to be like super super important, because if a person didn't yet come to that realization, like, hey, enough is enough, I'm no longer going to live like this, I don't find it acceptable at all the advice I'm going to give here is just going to basically go in one ear and out the other, and literally you're just kind of wasting your time listening to this live, to be honest, because the information I just give out is it requires the person to change the person that's causing their obesity, misery, and disease and medical drug dependence. And that's, in my opinion, always the person you see in the mirror, which is yourself, okay? That's going to be like 99.9%, 99.8% of health issues, even when they have some kind of foundation in a genetic predisposition. Because of course, genetics, loads the gun, but then your decisions in life pull the trigger. What you choose to do and who you choose to be, pull the trigger. And then, as the saying goes, you make decisions in life, but and I don't know where I got this from, but it's a popular quote. You make decisions in life, but in the end, your decisions end up making you. So it's very important to come to the realization, like, hey, I just don't want to be overweight anymore. I don't want to be taking all these medical drugs. This is totally not normal, and this is not the direction I want to go. So without doing that, no change is possible whatsoever. And the second step that I'll go through is just, as Walensky would say, just start being honest about the lies we tell ourselves, because again, honest change isn't possible without being conscious of, like, hey, what kind of lies am I telling myself to keep myself on this path? Because of course, being 20, 30, 40, 50 plus pounds overweight, you're going to have to create a lot of lies through various layers of cognitive dissonance to keep that ball rolling, because it doesn't happen overnight. So there have to be various behaviors that occur on a very consistent basis, and then also just various stories that justify those behaviors in one way or another, and various stories that basically revolve around lies, and then believing those lies as truths, and then building more lies upon those lies and believing those lies as truths. And it's kind of like a quicksand situation that a person sinks deeper and deeper into as they age. So remember, like being, 30, 40 pounds, 50 plus pounds overweight, it definitely didn't happen overnight. And it takes a lot of money, time, and effort to make a person this way. They have to, consistently go and buy a tremendous amount of processed food, overeat that food on a consistent basis. They have to go possibly eat out a lot or drink a lot, which costs a lot of money and time and effort to go and drive to these locations and eat from these locations. Or even if you're ordering the food from like Uber Eats, it takes a lot of effort to, call these companies, look through the menus, order it, pay, 400 or 500% more than what that meal would cost for you to make it at home, like an equivalent meal, et cetera, et cetera. And then the amount of time it takes you to make that money, the amount of time it takes you to make that money, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a tremendous amount of work. It's a tremendous amount of dedication. And then obviously, kind of looking in the mirror every day and maybe not seeing something you're happy about, and then kind of creating stories to keep justifying those actions. So without first being honest about the lies we tell ourselves, and then the various levels of cognitive dissonance, and then also just not coming to a complete resolution like, hey, this is not okay, and I'm not going to be living like this anymore, no change is possible at all. And from my observation, the only time those people decide to change is basically when a life emergency arises, such as like a divorce or a stroke or a heart attack or a diagnosis with cancer, type 2 diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. And in the meantime, their quality of life is actually like extremely low as well. In the meantime, presuming those things haven't yet happened and stuff of that sort. So typically people don't change until the pain teacher is quite severe and stuff of that sort. And unfortunately in our culture today, pathology has become normalized, and what's become more normalized is managing that pathology, mental and physical, through medical drug dependence. So oftentimes, when you have depression, when you have compulsive eating, when you have a lot of anxiety due to chronic stress, maybe from work, from maybe a overactive type A personality, an internal critic or whatever, family members. When you have that anxiety, that depression, that excessive weight gain, that high blood pressure, high cholesterol, whatever, name health symptom ABC, that is your body's way of telling you like something's wrong. It's a signal, because your body cannot communicate with you via language, So, when you have high blood pressure or a lot of anxiety, like chronic high grades of anxiety, that's your body's way of telling you like, hey, you need to slow down. Or like when you have high blood pressure, that's your body's way of telling you, obviously you have hypertension in the medical term, but what does that mean? Hyper, too much. And then tension, so too much tension in your life, you know? And for a lot of people, they just don't listen to these symptoms because if they did, they would probably come to the realization that they're living life unsustainably, which is easy to do in a Western culture, which is very high paced, especially like the US and some Western European countries. You know, it's very high paced. You kind of, for everyone's different, no absolutes, of course, but for the majority of Americans, I mean, look, you're getting up probably not well rested, getting on the freeway, stuck in traffic, deadline after deadline at work, some politics at work or whatever. That's totally normal with a culture of humans as well. Getting back on the freeway, surrounded by pollutants, you know, in a big city, for example, not eating a diet that's possibly has a good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. So the inflammation from your diet is quite high. Like I think the average American has 20 to 30 omega-6s in their diet for every one omega-3. Omega-6s are like pro-inflammatory. Nothing's wrong with them in the grand scheme of things when they're in good alignment and balance with omega-3s. But unfortunately, for the average American, they have like 20 or 30 omega-6s for every one omega-3 in their diet, and just almost non-existent amount of fiber, and just the quality of meat they eat is probably pretty poor too, and stuff of that sort, which all contributes to the inflammation variable, which all contributes to the total amount of stress imposed on the body and the central nervous system. And the central nervous system, if you look at it, doesn't do well at all with low-grade chronic stress. And this is what people a lot of times justify away. So it's like people think like, oh, it's not a big deal if I sit in traffic all day or I have these deadlines and stuff of that sort. I'm not getting like robbed or stuff of that. And they consider those situations where they're getting robbed as extremely stressful, but those situations with deadline after deadline at work, or financial stress, or interpersonal stress, or stress with the family, etc., they kind of shrug it off as not important. But it's actually those low-grade chronic stresses that really deteriorate the central nervous system at a quick, fast pace, because the central nervous system over 200. I mean, the human race in total has been around for some 2-3 million years or so. So it's not even that long in the grand scheme of the planet, which has been around for 4.6 billion years, at least at current estimates. But they may change as our technology changes, and the universe has been around for like 15 billion years or so. So the human race, especially the Homo sapien, is quite new to this universe. And if you look kind of like with the 28 plus human species that have come and gone, a lot of times people, they see the Homo sapien and this is like, oh, this is the only human that has ever existed. But actually there have been 28 plus human species that have disappeared. They're here at one point. They lasted for sometimes, like the Neanderthal lasted for like 200,000 years. There's some that lasted for multiple 100,000 years or maybe 1,000,000 years. And then they just vanished eventually, okay? So humans are pretty new here. And if you look at the way the Homo sapien has evolved over the years, their central nervous system, which its only purpose is to get you basically to survive in the external world, has evolved to basically deal with heightened stresses, but followed by valleys of nothing going on. So for example, I say this often, but you go for a hunt, it's pretty stressful. But then after that, there's nothing going on for quite a while. You're just hanging out with your tribesmen or women, whichever. The Neanderthals did hunt equally with the male and female, but in the Homo sapien race, that's when the female became more of a domesticated kind of citizen, and the males typically did the venturing out and stuff of that sort, while the females did more of the domestic work. So that's kind of interesting observation as well. But basically, the central nervous system has evolved with dealing with a heightened stressor, like a hunt, let's say a mammoth, pretty stressful, right? And then followed by valleys of absolutely nothing going on. But unfortunately, today you have a tremendous amount of chronic stresses, low-grade chronic stresses on full blast, especially if you're living in a big city. It's easy to fall into these pit holes. And also combined with macro stresses, big stresses too, like deadlines, financial stresses, et cetera, family stresses. Also stresses with possibly your personality type. You know, a lot of people have like an harsh internal critic, which if done, if attended to in a healthy way, it's okay. You know, it gets you out of bed, pushes you a little bit. But if it gets out of hand and it's constantly very critical of yourself and stuff of that sort, and you identify with it instead of identifying as the witness of it, et cetera, it could lead to a lot of stress and a lot of misery and depression and anxiety, especially like remember, wherever anxiety, chronic anxiety goes, depression always follows close behind, okay? So they're oftentimes very, very close friends and stuff of that sort. I don't know where I was getting with that. I kind of lost my track of thought, but basically, it's not normal, right, to be living that way. And on the podcast today, we're going to be talking about ways that a person can use their finances to help recover from their health challenges, from their aesthetic challenges, and possibly getting healthy enough to not have to be on like a 1,000,005 different medical drugs, which in my opinion is totally not normal, like at all. But it's been totally normalized in our culture today with 9 out of 10 Americans being metabolically sick. And that's what makes it very challenging for a lot of people to change because they see it as common. But just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal at all or to any degree. It's not normal at all. Obesity has nothing to do with genetics whatsoever. I know you're being sold this in my opinion, by a lot of drug companies, but just kind of look at the basic facts. You know, before 1950, there were basically almost no obese people in the U.S. And if you look back a little bit further to the hunter-gatherer era, you know, about 10,000 years ago, it was like literally zero obesity whatsoever, zero. And remember that your body can never gain body fat in a caloric deficit, right? If it could, you could just simply stop buying food because you can never starve to death. Or, you know, hypothetically, I'm not saying you do this, but you can just go get lost in the forest and you don't have anything to worry about because you won't starve to death because your body cannot lose weight in a caloric deficit at all. And of course, there are more than calories in, calories out. You definitely need a caloric deficit to lose weight. But what's also important is the way you source those calories, the way you distribute those macros depending on your goal, and your digestive health. You can get like a GI map test done to determine that, for example, and stuff of that sort. And all those numbers are going to vary in terms of how many calories you need, how to distribute those macros, et cetera, from person to person. So that's important to consider too. So once again, 40 years old. I'm 40 years old. I've come to the conclusion I just don't want to be on all of these medical drugs. I don't want to be not looking my best. I don't want to be not feeling my best. And also, I'm just tired of being overweight. I've come to that conclusion, and that's definitely a must because without that, there's no change. I'm also working really hard on just identifying the lies I told myself to keep myself in the path and the behaviors that led me to gain that 30, 40, 50 plus pounds of weight. That's also critically important. And some people may need to go see a good therapist for that, which is extremely hard to find because most therapists, unfortunately, from my experience, and I'm a huge psychology buff, just get into that field for the wrong reasons and also do a lot of projecting themselves unknowingly onto the client, which will result in the client never changing, you know? But if you find one, it's definitely a gold mine. And definitely don't let that one go. So for me personally, I found just studying a lot of like quantum psychology, especially presented by Stefan Wolinski, to be a huge game changer for me personally, and kind of stepped away from academic or traditional psychology as the main resource for mental health. So anyways, I came to these conclusions. I'm ready to change. Now, how could I divert my finances to help me create this change? Because inevitably, a belief system that led to you can't solve a problem with a belief system that led to that same problem, which is what a lot of people unfortunately try to do. There are no absolutes and there are some very minor exceptions, but 99.9% of the time it's an epic failure across the board. So the person would need to they need to do a few things. First, become their own mechanic for sure. That might be a good first step to start navigating some possible solutions. And to do that successfully, you need to, be reading like 1 or 2 books at least per month on the subject you're trying to improve in. If it's nutrition, then read books on nutrition. If it's, Physiology, if you're trying to learn about central nervous system management to reduce your stress, then do that. Or maybe psychology, maybe read more books on quantum psychology or non-duality or stuff of this sort. But you need to invest that time. You need to maybe check out sites like pubmed.gov and see what the latest research is. So read the books, but sometimes remember the authors could be biased. So you need to check their claims with some studies, but then also use some intuition and see how well that works for you. And that requires some trial and error as well. And then also possibly hiring a mentor. And I know a lot of times I do get people, like, for example, just recently, I had a person that was, like, for example, 75 pounds overweight, and they weren't willing to spend more than $50 on their health, which shows how little respect they have for themselves. Meanwhile, you can check out their page, and it's full of them eating out and stuff of that sort, and spending at least $8,000 to $16,000 a year keeping themselves obese, no problem, directly and indirectly. Sometimes unconsciously they do this. They've been doing this for so long, and then you tell them to buy organic food, and they're like, "Oh, I don't have money for that." And you tell them to maybe take a course that's like not even that much money that could really help improve the quality of their life, help them look amazing. "Oh, I don't have enough money for that." But then you look at their finances and you're like, "Well, where are these? It looks like you have $8,000 to $16,000 a year on eating out, local little trips, weekend trips, maybe international travel, alcohol, and other non-essential expenses. You have so much money for that, but you don't have any money to show your self-respect, to learn about how to take care of your biological body and your mental health and get yourself to aesthetically look appealing. You definitely don't have money for that, but you do have, like, the average American spends $8,000 to $16,000 a year on non-essential expenses every year, which is far more than a $2,000 or 2,000 calorie a day full organic diet every single day of the year, the whole entire year, or far more than most health courses. Like, a lot of people reach out to me for advice, and I'm like, "Well, just take this health course." I literally don't make any money off of these courses. These courses don't even belong to any of my friends. They're just good courses I know of. And I tell them, "Take this course, do this, read this book." "Oh, I don't have that money." I'm like, "Dude, you do have that money. It's just you have a mind virus." I mean, once again, a mind virus, in my opinion, is not my opinion. It's just, like, generally fact. A mind virus is, like, literally the deadliest virus on the planet that has killed and created more misery than any other virus the human race has ever been exposed to. With 9 out of 10 Americans right now metabolically sick, and pretty much anywhere you walk outside in America today, all you see is obesity, misery, and disease. Even people that don't think they are overweight, because they don't look overweight compared to how overweight most other people are still very, very overweight. Like, if you have noticeable lower chest fat and even like an inch of belly fat on your midsection, like an inch density you're already in the overweight category as a male. No problem. Or maybe even hovering close to obese. And for today's standards, even that is considered very lean. So just to give you an idea of how far the American public has deviated into a life of mental and physical pathology, and how much they have normalized it. Unfortunately, it's just getting worse, especially with the rise of, like, Ozempic and other fat loss drugs and stuff of that sort. That just shows how far dissociated and disconnected people have become, and how desperate they've become to do everything possible outside of the one thing that will create real change in their life, and that's changing the person that's causing their obesity, misery, medical drug dependence, and disease. That's the only thing that's going to cause permanent change in literally 99% of cases, from my observation. And it goes back to the finance thing. It's like, what are you doing with your finances? Are your finances reflective of living a health conscious life? So it's the weekend. Almost nobody is going to do this, because, once again, people that suffer from just being excessively overweight and stuff of this sort and having a lot of health issues, no absolutes, but in the majority of cases, they've already developed stories and lies to keep the circus running, right? So they're not going to do this, or if they do this, they're going to kind of dilute the numbers and not be truthful with themselves. But basically, if you look over your expenses, if you count everything, like if you go on the weekend, how much gas does it take you to drive there? How much was parking? How much was your food? How much were your drinks? How much was the tip? Maybe you bought a shirt or whatever, new pants. How much was that? How much was the Uber? Maybe you went on a date. Then how much was the cost of your date, et cetera, et cetera. Like add it all up. Add up all your trips, all your finances, and see how much you're spending on non-essential expenses. And I almost guarantee you it will be $8,000 to $16,000 a year, which gives you a tremendous amount of financial flexibility to then take that money and divert it into more health conscious choices, okay? Because all those non-essential expenses, from my observation, are going to do nothing but provide sugar highs at best. Like, okay, cool. You went to a trip to Europe. That was like $2,000 to $3,000 for a week. And now you're back to, your job you may not like, and that's causing you to have various issues, which are causing you to stress eat, which are causing you to be obese. And 2 weeks goes by, you're filled and bombarded with deadlines, you become myopic again, and you forget about your trip, but you're down $2,000 to $3,000, and you're still obese, and you're becoming more obese, and you need more medical drugs. And you're totally okay with spending that money on the European trip, but hey, you're not okay with spending the money on organic food, or possibly spending the money on some kind of mentoring to maybe teach you how to be an entrepreneur or find a better job that's more conducive and reflective of your core values, or more facilitative of your health conscious choices and outlook on life now. Those are questions you need to ask yourself inevitably, because you need to know what's important for you. If, living a life of obesity, misery, and disease your whole entire life, and needing to take a myriad of medical drugs just to kind of get up in the morning is okay with you, then that's okay with you. What do you want me to say? Okay, so first step is to tally up all of your expenses. And if you're honest with yourself, the average American is definitely spending $8,000 to $16,000 a year on non-essential expenses every freaking year, which is way more than you need for really good mentoring, way more than you need for organic food all year round, way more than you need for courses, and definitely way, way more than you need for like a myriad of books, as you can kind of see here. I love reading. I'm an avid reader. It's a great opportunity to be able to basically get very cheap mentoring from amazing people if you find the right authors that have dedicated their whole entire life probably to writing one book. And you can fast track their knowledge, fast track all of their mistakes by just reading that one book. You got to be careful with books today, unfortunately, because a lot of them try to like sell you on something or upsell you on something. I definitely don't do that with my books. I have 2 published books, Laws of Aesthetics and Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide. Literally just, I want the person to succeed and give them all the tools, including like a myriad of video links as well, to help refine the understanding of the material. But when you find like a good author, just look at it as an opportunity, like, hey, you can sit down with 20, 30, 40 years of knowledge condensed in just 200 pages, probably read those 200 pages in like a week, and you have all that knowledge fast-tracked, and you kind of stand on their shoulders and more fast-track your journey. For like a used copy on Amazon is like $2 to $3, and people spend that $5 on a cheap coffee at Starbucks with all those microplastics in there and everything, and just adding all those, trace amounts of myriad of biocides they use to grow that coffee. And they're okay with spending that, bombarding it with sugar with their Frappuccino and adding to their obesity, misery, and disease, but which totally makes sense, because they wouldn't be full of obesity, misery, and disease if they had core values that are more conducive and reflective of health conscious choices. Like I always say, sick people can't make healthy decisions, or they wouldn't be sick to begin with. So they already have like a mind virus. So it's important to do a lot of research on identifying these traits. Mind virus being some kind of belief system or ideas that lead to certain behaviors that lead to the deterioration of your biology. Okay? And a lot of people in denial are going to deny that, but that's why they stay full of obesity, misery, and disease their whole entire life. And then kind of create stories and lies around those stories and believe them as truths to keep the ball spinning. Because remember, to become overweight and develop various health challenges almost always takes a tremendous amount of time and effort. So they have to have these belief systems that keep them doing these behaviors and justifying it in one way or another. And without reversing those belief systems, identifying those lies that you think are truths, etc., no change is really possible. The only thing you can hope for is just to medically drug yourself out for the rest of your life, and that's it, just to kind of buy yourself some more time. So first step, identify all your expenses. Second step, identify how much you're spending on eating out, going out, weekend trips, etc., etc. There's usually with eating out about a 300 to 400% markup for your meals. So if you can make the meal of equivalent value at home, just to give you an idea, I mean, having like an all organic diet per day is about $12, 2,000 calories for the whole day, $12, all organic, like at least USDA organic certified, okay? And you go to like McDonald's, you go to a restaurant, it's ready 20, $25, no problem. That again doesn't factor in the drive, the gas, maybe the parking, the tax, et cetera, et cetera. Plus you can get drinks, all that stuff. So totally okay to spend money on that, but not okay to spend money on organic food, et cetera, et cetera. So identify how much you're spending on eating out, alcohol, non-essential expenses, all of that stuff. It adds up, and all those little expenses cumulatively add up to your biggest expense at the end of the year. So your job then is to divert those expenses into more health conscious and reflective choices, you know, organic food, getting a gym membership, or maybe buying some basic equipment for your home if you're pressed for time. Health courses. Mentoring is great, you know, because again, it's going to be really tough or pretty much impossible to solve a problem with the same belief system that led to the problem. And a mentor can help bring in an outside perspective and help you see and learn things you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And it's kind of tough to find those out. No absolutes. Sometimes it does happen, but it's very rare. So just evaluate all that. Evaluate all those purchases, all those international trips, all those local trips, all those shows, video games maybe, and stuff of that sort. It adds up, okay? And if you see it gives you way more than enough cash and free money to invest here into yourself, and start showing respect for yourself, you know, because what do you got once you lose your mental and physical health? Not a very good quality of life, that's for sure. So another thing to consider is like car purchases. That's one of the biggest wastes of money for most Americans. And by car purchases, I mean most people definitely need a car. I'm not saying they don't, but just buy like the cheapest thing possible to get you from A to B so you can free up your money, so then you can use that money somehow to invest in other things that will eventually get you out of the rat race and working unsustainable hours, which a lot of people unfortunately have to do in a lot of work environments for one reason or another. And in any health journey, in my opinion, one of the aspects of the health journey is to figure out how to get out of the rat race as well. Because oftentimes in like corporate environments, for example, I'm more familiar with that area because I used to do corporate health lectures. It's just very unsustainable and not very conducive to health in general. I mean, the food they have there is shit. You have to waste a lot of money, time driving over there if you're still working in person. Just the politics of that. A lot of people are there just very like mentally and physically not well at all. So you have to absorb that kind of energy. The deadlines, unsustainable work schedules, sitting in front of the computer all day. I mean, I can go on and on, you know. If you've worked in that environment, you don't need me to explain it to you. You know exactly what it is. A great first step, in my opinion, what I would do in this situation is try to work remote 100% as best as I can, because that alone will free up your time by about an hour or two a day, which will give you way more than enough time to sleep in if you need it, get your workouts in if you need it, maybe go run a few errands so you have some balance and don't feel so backed up with a lot of errands in life if you need it, etc., etc. All these little things make a huge difference. And the most important thing about working remote, the biggest benefit, is just distancing yourself from all the corporate politics and backstabbing at work and all the different personalities that bring their issues to work and stuff of this sort. Because unfortunately, just a lot of people in that environment aren't going to want to change, you know? And the pyramid structure of corporate work incentivizes kind of inner competition. So people, you know, want your position, et cetera, and then you got to watch out for that. And all those little tribes and politics at work, a myriad of things. They're not conducive to your fitness or your health, mental or physical health goals in any way. So another important step, in my opinion, is just learning to get out of that environment and establish an environment where you can be autonomous, and that way it can make it very easy for you to just live true and reflective of your core values, whatever they may be. So what keeps people bogged down a lot of times is just buying a car that they can't afford. And then they have to keep paying for that car. But I'm like, dude, it's just taking you to and from work that you don't even want to be at anyways. So they get a promotion. Even if they get a promotion, they figure out a way to spend money on non-essentials. And then they stay equally as broke and then financially stressed because, okay, now you have, a house and a car, but you're still living paycheck to paycheck. It's just you're paying for a house and a car. And another big issue that I see is people purchasing houses they can't afford or barely could afford. And it's fine to purchase a house if you figure out a way to make it an asset, meaning like you rent it out, or you buy like a fourplex, for example, or above and live in one of the units while you rent out the other 3 units. And then basically you're living there for free. Okay, there's another great example of how to do it. But if you're purchasing a house just to live on it, but it's costing you $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, and you're basically living paycheck to paycheck, that's just going to add a lot of stress to your life, make you very myopic because now you're starved for cash, and also keep you possibly in work environments that you don't want to be in anymore. Working crazy hours, having to meet those deadlines now because you need the paycheck, et cetera, et cetera. So in my opinion, when people purchase houses, but it's more of like a liability, it's a terrible financial choice, in my opinion. Now, if it's an asset and you convert it into like a rental and figure out a way to have that rental, like a fourplex, for example, allow you to live for free, that's another story. And then the asset appreciates as well over time, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole different story, but you guys get what I'm saying here. So the 8th step, of course, like I mentioned before, is in any health journey, one of the aspects to focus on is getting out of the rat race, not having to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week in maybe work environments that have a lot of politics in it, unbearable deadlines, et cetera, et cetera. Another important thing of getting out of the rat race is not having to work with people you don't want to work with anymore, which can have a huge benefit to your mental and physical health, like super massive. It's very important. And then also allow you to have the creativity that you need and want in your life to express yourself fully, because oftentimes people may say like an engineer, oh, like I love my field, engineering, and that's great if you found your passion and you're honest about that. But the problem is you also need an environment to reflect and facilitate your passion. So let's say a person is passionate about engineering, and they're passionate about engineering, but building like airplanes, or cars, but they're working in a firm that builds like dishwashers, So, okay, so there's a mismatch in an environment then, and then they happen to be working with a boss they don't like, that doesn't understand nonviolent forms of communication, just yells at people all day. Well, that's not going to be good for your health at all, especially if you're there 8 to 10 hours a day and you're spending way more time with the people you work with than with the people you love. So of course, if it's not a great environment, how are you going to be happy? How are you going to be healthy? You have to form maladaptive behaviors then to deal with all of that. And those maladaptive behaviors, they can take on a myriad of different forms, some socially acceptable, like working way too much. That's a maladaptive behavior a lot of people use to escape their reality, drown themselves in work or drown themselves in food. Because food, a lot of people fall into this trap. It loves you for who you are. It doesn't ask any questions, It's there when you want it. It gives you pleasure when you want it, and then it leaves when you want it, So it's there for you unconditionally. And people use that as a form of medication, okay? They use food as that, as well as various medical drugs and stuff of that sort. It's just like a disastrous life based off maladaptive behavior and stuff of that sort. So some things to consider. Some good books. There's a lot on finance, I'm sure, that I don't know either, but just some good books that would already put you way ahead of the crowd are just like The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. It's a really old book, and honestly, there's a free audio of it on YouTube if you just don't want to buy it. But again, start questioning like, why is it that you're spending so much money on non-essential expenses, $8,000 to $16,000 a year if you're honest with yourself, but don't even want to buy like a $5 book that'll help you escape the rat race and save money and not be financially stressed anymore. or not buy a course, or get a mentor or buy whatever. That's something to question. That's important, It's like, why do I believe this is okay? Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I can't even read my own handwriting here. It's been a long time since I read this book, but that's also a very basic, down-to-earth book on just easy ways to financially manage your money in a more healthy and sustainable way and stuff of that sort. So you guys, there's so much more to cover here. And again, all of the advice I provided here literally mean absolutely nothing if a person is still in a deep state of denial that everything is okay when clearly everything is not okay at all. So this information is totally bogus. This information only works for people that are ready to create like real honest change in their life. And until then, if you're not ready to create real honest change in your life, none of this stuff is going to work. It's just going to go in one ear and out the other. And that's just how it is. So for the very few people that are ready to go on that honest journey, that may not be easy, but it's an honest journey that will provide honest change. Here's some things to focus on. The next step is to really just focus on figuring out how to make it work for yourself. Dilo is in the house. Dilo, we just finished actually, and I'm gonna just kind of go study at a lounge right after this and everything. So you guys have a great weekend. I hope this information helps. It's not for everyone. It's not easy to apply because inevitably you have to change the person that's causing all of your issues, which is most always you in one way or another. And a lot of people just don't want to do that. And that's why a lot of people never get better. And they look the same year after year, if not worse, and they're on more medical drugs and more overweight. That's okay. If they're okay with that, and if they want to develop some lies around why they're okay with that, then just let them do their thing. Okay, you guys, wishing you guys the best, of course, and have a good weekend, okay? Wishing you guys the best, honestly. Take care. Bye.